Well, welcome to the Everyday Discernment podcast. My guest this week is David A.R. White. David is an actor, screenwriter, producer, author, and businessman. He is the co-founder of PureFlix Entertainment. He starred in movies such as God's Not Dead, Revelation Road, and more recently, Beckman, Finding Love in Quarantine. His newest movie, God's Not Dead, We the People, comes out on October 4th. David, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We were talking that, we've kind of connected a little bit on TikTok. That's one thing I left out of your bio is you're a TikTok influencer, over 80,000 people now. You do some funny videos with your family and kids and things going on. So it's cool to see you on there. You're a busy guy. So how do you kind of keep everything together and focus on family and that kind of stuff too? Like, as I talk about discernment with time, it's kind of one of the big things is like just keeping it all functional, so you don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great question. I think life is a big balance. There's no doubt about it. I've been trying to tell my kid this.
Yeah.
He's 15 now and new into high school and, basketball and all this stuff going on. And it's just a matter of just balance, I think. And so priorities, obviously.
Sure.
And then keeping your head on straight. But ultimately, you just give it to the Lord and say, so, there's, it's an interesting thing because there's, when you're young, you're so hungry, you have so much energy, you're, constantly driving to, to do stuff, achieve things, that kind of thing. And, but as you get older, I think as you have your hands in more things, ultimately you need the Lord's wisdom to know what to put your hand to and to find that balance. And so, it's always a work in progress, no doubt.
That's really good. My perspective changed when I was in my 20s and I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. And there were some opportunities that came up that I knew would be at the sacrifice of my family. And I didn't want to put my family on the altar of success, to sacrifice them at the expense of a job. And so I kind of had to make that decision young. And everyone kind of needs to come to that realization of what you think you want may not be God's plans for your life. And sometimes it's not that God's plans are always easy, but it's the fact that there's a peace that follows when you're following God's will and seeing that through. And a lot of times you don't see the blessing from that until years down the road, when you look back and you see the hand of God on your life and you kind of see that he was in it, and you kind of see where you maybe, veered off course a little bit, trying to do your own thing. And that's why I think discernment is so important, making decisions that honor God, because every day we're faced with thousands of decisions, and how do we kind of process that, his will versus my will, and keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus as is the focus of this season. So anything else you want to tell us about, growing up? I know you grew up Mennonite, which you talk about in your book, Between Heaven and Hollywood, which I find fascinating, how you kind of got to where you are today, kind of that whole process of discerning God's voice in your life and not just kind of doing what you knew, but kind of stepping out of your comfort zone and pursuing God. What was that like?
Yeah. I think it was just like everybody's life, don't think everybody grows up in a small town in a Mennonite community with a father who was a pastor. And, I have a joke. I always say that Mennonites make the Mormons look like a pack of Hell's Angels, I mean, I grew up very conservative and I saw one movie in the theater the first 18 years of my life.
Wow.
But I had a passion early on for the entertainment industry, and it didn't make sense as to where it came from. But I believe, as you were saying, that God puts these dreams on our life, and if we, allow him to work in our lives and follow his dream for us, as opposed to just something that we have, all ourselves.
Yeah.
You're amazed to see what he does with it, and it doesn't happen overnight. I've been in LA now almost 30 years, and I would not have imagined that I was going to be in the faith-based entertainment industry for as long as I have. But it was a pleasant surprise, and God had always given me a passion for Christian films, and there really wasn't much of a genre for it, and I never would have imagined that I'd be on the forefront of creating a genre. But God uses the most unlikely people to do extraordinary things, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. The Christian movie industry has come a long way. I remember in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't a lot. I remember like there was some Christian tribulation movies that came out that freaked me out as a kid. We used to watch those, and they're cheesy looking back on them now, but it's, we look how far that you've come with PureFlix alone, and the great quality of content that comes out frequently. And there's always a new movie on there, and or new something for the family, something for the kids. And but that didn't just happen overnight. What was your thought process behind when you co-founded it? Like, how did that passion get inside of you to start something new?
I mean, we just felt like there was a uh, what am I trying to say? A hole in the system that needed to be fixed.
Yeah.
And like, the studios really didn't have any faith labels at the time. And so we as producers first, started producing these films, and then it was hard to find homes for them. And we really felt like the need to create a place that would, put these films out into the world, a production and distribution outlet for it. And that's where really PureFlix came up. And myself, Michael Scott, and Russell Wolf, had this, I think, had all the same passion for that. And so in 2005, we established PureFlix, and then Elizabeth Travis came on later, and Allison, and many, as you said, I think obviously there's a lot of people involved in making something work, and God gave that passion to a lot of different people. And so yeah, I mean, I think we've done, I don't know, maybe 60 movies we produced and over the years. And then of course, when God's Not Dead came in, that kind of opened the world up more, because it opened the foreign, and theatrical world up.
Yeah, that was one of my questions for you, is in God's Not Dead kind of took over, and really, in my opinion, it seemed like it just snowballed the whole Christian movie phenomenon, with and it's a series now and a new one coming out. Like, talk about that success, and not just what it did for Christian movies, but as a message of faith for those who don't believe, to the message of faith it gives, that anyone can watch that movie and get something out of it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, the goal was always to open up conversations, in schools, about, bringing God into schools.
Yeah.
And so, in the first one, obviously it started out with the college campus, and then in the second one, it went to the high school. The third one was, I think came out around 2017, 18, something like that, when, the world was, the line that I like in that line is, in that movie, is God's Not Dead, a light in darkness, is that everybody's screaming, but no one's listening. And, as believers, obviously, as everybody has their own point of view, but if you can start to, listen to others and hear them of what their concerns are, and then as believers, we bring love, hopefully, first and foremost, to people, to different situations. And so, and the question always is there another God's Not Dead movie? Should there be another one, or should the franchise kind of, be done? And when God's Not Dead, We the People came up, this was a script actually that had been worked on for quite a while. And then Tommy Blaze really came in and breathed new life into it. And it deals with the homeschooling, homeschoolers, as a launching point, but ultimately it ends up in Washington, D.C., where I think, for such a time as this right now, it couldn't be more current. And we didn't plan that, once again, it really didn't have much to do with us.
Yeah. As a homeschooler, I can appreciate that. So, but what is like the elevator pitch for this new movie, God's Not Dead, We the People? I know you said briefly about it, but what is, and I know it has an event in the theaters, October 4th, 5th, and 6th, I believe.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everybody to support that. Even if you have a PureFlix subscription, go and support it in the theaters if it's in your area. But just tell people what they can expect when they go see this movie.
Yeah, it ultimately is trying to take the government out of controlling our lives. That's
Yeah.
really the core message at all of it. And it starts with the homeschoolers. I think I didn't know much about homeschooling. My children, go to a Christian school. I'm fortunate to say I grew up in a just a secular school. But
Hmm.
uh, the more you dig in on homeschooling, and now, especially with COVID, obviously so many parents had to homeschool their kids and
Yeah.
are, hopefully they're done doing that. The kids were able to go back to school,
Yeah.
but for the academia and the time that you spend with your kids, it's actually a beautiful thing. And if parents can be involved in that, it's wonderful. But when the government starts to come into that, and and tried to shift your curriculum or take God out of even homeschools,
Yeah.
it starts to get a little scary. And that's what this movie really is. That the backdrop is these just regular parents, all of a sudden have a trip to Washington D.C. to plead their case. And so it's government should be for the people, for we the people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the backdrop of it.
That's great. And what a appropriate time for a movie like this to come out when we're facing these challenges today,
Yeah.
with government overreach and, restrictions and that kind of stuff, where we really question, what is our role as Christians in government, and we should submit to authority, but at what point, until the point where you have to sin, where you have to go against your convictions. There's this fine line that right now we're in kind of a fine line territory, but what happens when they start pushing that too far? And that's something I've asked, among the pastors in my church. What happens when, they come for different things that we take as freedoms now in America. But persecution, we say lightly in America compared to other places like China and Afghanistan, and there are Christians that flourish in those areas. But at the same time, we want to protect what's here. We don't want to just give it up either, because there is, I think, a blessing living under a nation that is founded upon religious freedom. Not making somebody do a certain thing that is from people controlling the narrative, but from letting people just have that freedom. And in that, you find Christian freedoms, you find Christian presence in areas like movies and culture that has kind of shaped America. And it's been shaped by a melting pot of different things. But at the same time, there should not just be one specific direction that everybody has to kind of acquiesce to.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And then you have there's a great line in there from Ronald Reagan about the price of freedom, and remembering how hard it was to get our freedom.
Yeah.
Like, as sometimes we just take for granted the freedoms that we have here in America.
Yeah.
And as you said, when you go around the world, um, those freedoms come at a great cost.
Right.
And it can be as easily taken away as it was given.
Yeah. What an awesome movie for it to come out. I would again recommend everyone support that. And one of the focuses of the season is what we do every day to keep our eyes on Jesus. And so what have you found for yourself, when a world filled with distractions and just looking at the news or government or social media can keep our eyes off of God? And sometimes we just need practical steps, to apply to our life. And so I like to ask that question because there's sometimes things we can learn from other people who do this as part of their daily routine. So what have you found for yourself specifically, things you can do or have done that help you keep your eyes on Jesus every day?
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. It's I think again, it gets that back to balance. And we like, growing up in a Mennonite household, with a pastor, as a pastor's son, there's no doubt about it. And obviously you're a pastor. And so,
Yeah.
The amount of I think pressure that one feels can be a lot, and especially in a very conservative household, or community, the pressure is more, and also ultimately sometimes judgment comes into that, and all
Sure.
these other things. But I think that what I found, since I came to Los Angeles when I was 19, and and I had to go through, obviously, I think in any, no matter where you are, you go through, you realize how much grace is in Christianity,
Yeah.
and how much Christ did for us. And that it's not necessarily about your works, or obviously you pursue God, you do your best in and of yourself. And then obviously God has to work through you, as you prayed, for us,
Yeah.
before we ever started this. But that's, I've been just more and more amazed with the grace of God and the faithfulness of the Lord. And
Yeah.
even in our weakness, even in the when we mess up, when we take our eyes off of him, he's always there for us. And I tell my kids this over and over and over, he'll never leave you or forsake you.
Right.
Like just as I love my kids, and obviously they can do things that you sometimes aren't very pleased with their behavior, but
Right.
you unconditionally love them, and God unconditionally loves us in that same way. And for that, and it's, I obviously, as we grow and get older, our walks with the Lord change in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's but that's part of the journey.
That's so good. And there's so many good analogies in parenting that I've seen over the years too, of just, realizing that when your children mess up, it grieves you because you want what's best for them, and you know that they chose the wrong choice. But like you're saying, you never stop loving them. They never get excommunicated out of the family, and so at the same time, that's kind of how God is for us. He wants what's best for us. He wants us to make that correct choice. But at the same time, it doesn't, he doesn't stop loving us. He never stops loving us. And so there's this good mix between, grace, but then also caring about the heart of our Father, just like we want our kids to, say they're sorry, not just out of obligation, but because they actually feel sorry, and God wants us to come to him because we're truly sorry. And from that, he will receive us. He will, restore what was been broken. And I think that's great as far as, when you see Christianity, a lot of times from the outside, it looks like a bunch of rules, but when you get inside of it and you understand the heart of the Father, you realize it's about relationship. And it's not about a perfect relationship on our end. It's about the fact that he's perfect, and we want to be perfect as he is, but we're going to go along a long path to get there with a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. And from that becomes a great growing process of being more like Christ every day. So
It's beautiful.
Awesome. So I want to talk too about discerning content specifically. I have a chapter in my book about discerning entertainment media specifically, and kind of the balance there between, what's right, what's not right, especially as a parent, what should I show my kids, what should I not? And PureFlix has paved the way for this with some awesome family friendly content. So what are your thoughts on how media has changed and how Christians need to be on guard about what they consume? Just personally, just growing up in the 80s and 90s, it's changed so much, where now everything possible is accessible in your hand, where previously you had to go to a movie store, rent a movie, hopefully not get caught by your parents if it's a bad movie, that kind of stuff. And now just the shift in culture and technology has just paved this way for just anything can go if you just, have a moment when you are not on guard, or you're not watching your kids properly, and they can go down this path where you don't want them to go. So kind of what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, that's a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's especially when you have kids, it starts with you want to protect your kids as long as you can, and obviously our society is, it's way different than when we grew up.
Yeah.
And you're right, everything is at your fingertips. And so, the scary thing is, I mean, I think there's nothing more mind numbing to parents than your kids on their iPads or their phones,
Right.
or the gaming systems, and it's hard to balance and try to monitor all that stuff.
Yeah.
But and that's really where PureFlix came out of, is how, if you could have somehow a slice of what you had back, in the 80s or 90s for family time, or a device that, 24/7, you don't have to worry about what's on there for your kids or even yourself, and then you insert even, so it's not just the A-Team you're watching or something like that, but you're
Yeah.
then on top of it, the faith messages that, there's so many, obviously, pureflix.com was created to be a haven for this kind of content, and a place that everybody could access it at, all the time. And so we're excited because there's the family shows and there's all that stuff on there too, but there's also then, the best faith movies that have ever been made on there.
Yeah.
And there's over 10,000 titles on pureflix.com. And just grateful that I get to be a part of that. And I love it that it exists. I love it when my kids watch it. And me too.
Yeah, that's a good perspective too, because, all the negative stuff I said can also be a positive thing. If you look at the connectivity we have, the ability to spread the gospel like never before, the ability to watch wholesome content on an app like PureFlix, on kids' iPads when they're doing it. And even if it's not, mature content that I was talking about, we still have to have discernment with our time. When your kid's on an iPad for 6 hours, that's a problem. So you have to find that balance of not only good content, but also, the right amount of time, with having a balanced approach to it as well. And so that's a tough thing as parents, but at the same time, you kind of have to train up your kids in the way they will go, and they will not depart from it, as the Bible says. And you want to give them the foundation so that you don't have to constantly make all the decisions for them. That's the goal as parents, right? To train them up to be adults that can function and live according to God's plan for their life. And so sometimes that means that your kids have to fail, so that way they can learn, and it can be a training moment. And so I see that with my kids too. When my son's on, the Switch for 3 hours at a time, I'd be like, okay, you're not using your time wisely today. There's things you need to get done. There's other things you could spend time doing. And so we have to look for those learning moments as parents, and then also giving them that content like PureFlix.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Thank you. Yeah, that is like that's the other side too, is you want your kids to do something productive, and to be the best, that book, the book that I wrote, it's called Finding, or Between Heaven and Hollywood, Chasing Your God-Given Dream. And so in the middle of all these distractions that as our kids have, how in the world do we allow them to focus on the things that God really wants them to focus on? But not only the Word of God, but also just using the gifts and talents that He gave them to the best of their abilities.
Yeah.
And that's always the thing too, for the best of our abilities, that we do it as well. And so, it's good stuff. So, but I'm excited for God's Not Dead, We the People. I don't want to forget about that October 4, 5, and 6, it comes out. And I would ask if everyone can, the faith-based film industry, it's a freedom. And it's a freedom because we've been able to go into theaters more and more. And ultimately it became that because, the audience out there that's listening to this, you guys made a way to do that. And by casting your vote, every time you buy a movie ticket and you go to the theater, you're casting your vote saying, I want more of this in our theaters and more of this out there. And so our prayer is that people would be moved to want to go to the theaters on October 4, 5, and 6. And then, and if they're in the middle of COVID and for whatever reason they can't get there, God's Not Dead is streaming on godsnotdead.com. Go there and you can watch it too while it's in theaters on all your devices. So
get everyone together at your church, go do a watch party at a theater locally, and help support this awesome effort, something very relevant for today. So you said the website. Where else can people connect with you and the work you're doing?
Well, I'm just at David A.R. White. So on Facebook, Instagram, or, even TikTok.
Yep, definitely TikTok. And then I saw too a trailer for Love on the Rock. That looks exciting, coming out. That's in November, I believe. So that's another.
Thank you. Yeah. That it comes out actually late October everywhere. And it's a fun one. That's the one we did in Malta last November, of all things.
Oh wow.
And so that was a whole ride in and of itself, You
get to be an action star. I'm a big James Bond fan myself, so I loved Beckman. Was awesome, and now you get to go to these awesome locations, and so very cool, man. So thank you so much for coming on. God bless you and everything you're doing, and I'll make sure to put all that stuff in the show notes. Go see God's Not Dead, We the People.
Now I have one question here because
Yeah.
I'm going to put us on Instagram. And,
Oh, awesome.
What is your Instagram handle?
It's discerning_dad. Are you still there?
TikTok. It's been fun watching you.
Awesome.
I think we froze there for a second.
Yeah, we froze there for a second, but all good. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you around.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Everyday Discernment Podcast. For more information on Discerning Dad, go to discerning-dad.com. Be sure to follow on all the social media platforms. Just search for Discerning Dad. Please share this podcast with a friend and leave an honest review on whichever platform you listen. Feel free to send any comments, suggestions, questions, or prayer requests at discerningdad@outlook.com. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.